Book 2, Chapter 20 of the Wars of the Jews. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Wars of the Jews by Josephus. Translated by William Whiston. Book 2, Chapter 20. Cestius sends ambassadors to Nero. The people of Damascus slay those Jews that lived with them. The people of Jerusalem, after they had left off pursuing Cestius, return to the city and get things ready for its defense, and make a great many generals for their armies, and particularly Josephus, the writer of these books, some account of his administration. After this calamity had befallen Cestius, many of the most eminent of the Jews swam away from the city, as from a ship when it was going to sink. Costobarus, therefore, and Saul, who were brethren, together with Philip, the son of Jachimus, who was the commander of King Agrippa's forces, ran away from the city, and went to Cestius. But then how Antipas, who had been besieged with them in the king's palace, but would not fly away with them, was afterwards slain by the seditious, we shall relate hereafter. However, Cestius sent Saul and his friends, at their own desire, to Achaia, to Nero, to inform him of the great distress they were in, and to lay the blame of their kindling the war upon Florus, as hoping to alleviate his own danger, by provoking his indignation against Florus. In the meantime, the people of Damascus, when they were informed of the destruction of the Romans, set about the slaughter of those Jews that were among them; and as they had them already cooped up together in the place of public exercises, which they had done out of the suspicion they had of them, they thought they should meet with no difficulty in the attempt. Yet did they distrust their own wives, which were almost all of them addicted to the Jewish religion, on which account it was that their greatest concern was how they might conceal these things from them. So they came upon the Jews, and cut their throats, as being in a narrow place, in number 10,000, and all of them unarmed, and this in 1 hour's time, without anybody to disturb them. But as to those who had pursued after Cestius, when they were returned back to Jerusalem, they overbore some of those that favored the Romans by violence, and some them persuaded, by entreaties, to join with them, and got together in great numbers in the temple, and appointed a great many generals for the war. Joseph also, the son of Gorion, [Footnote: From this name of Joseph, the son of Gorion, or Gorion the son of Joseph, one of the governors of Jerusalem, who was slain at the beginning of the tumults by the Zealots. The much later Jewish author of a history of that nation takes his title, and yet personates our true Josephus, the son of Matthias; but the cheat is too gross to be put upon the learned world. End of the footnote. And Ananus the high priest were chosen as governors of all affairs within the city, and with a particular charge to repair the walls of the city, for they did not ordain Eleazar, the son of Simon, to that office, although he had gotten into his possession the prey they had taken from the Romans, and the money they had taken from Cestius, together with a great part of the public treasures, because they saw he was of a tyrannical temper, and that his followers were, in their behaviour, like guards about him. However, the want they were in of Eleazar's money, and the subtle tricks used by him, brought also about that the people were circumvented, and submitted themselves to his authority in all public affairs. They also chose other generals from Idumea, Jesus the son of Saphias, one of the high priests, and Eleazar the son of Ananias, the high priest. They also enjoined Niger, the then governor of Idumea, who was of a family that belonged to Perea beyond Jordan, and was thence called the Perite, that he should be obedient to those forenamed commanders. [Footnote: We may observe here that the Idumeans as having been proselytes of justice since the days of John Hyrcanus, during about 195 years, were now esteemed as part of the Jewish nation, and these provided of a Jewish commander accordingly. Nor did they neglect the care of other parts of the country, but Joseph, the son of Simon, was sent as general to Jericho, as was Manasseh to Perea, and John the Essecu to the toparchy of Thamah. Lydda was also added to his portion, and Joppa and Emmaus. But John, the son of Matthias, was made governor of the toparchies of Gopchnitica and Acrabattini, as was Josephus, the son of Matthias, of both the Galilees. Gamala also, which was the strongest city in those parts, was put under his command. So every one of the other commanders administered the affairs of his portion with that alacrity and prudence they were masters of. But as to Josephus, when he came into Galilee, his first care was to gain the good will of the people of that country, as sensible that he should thereby have in general good success, although he should fail in other points. And being conscious to himself that if he communicated part of his power to the great men, he should make them his fast friends, and that he should gain the same favour from the multitude, if he executed his commands by persons of their own country, and with whom they were well acquainted, he chose out 70 of the most prudent men, and those elders in age, and appointed them to be rulers of all Galilee, as he chose 7 judges in every city, to hear the lesser quarrels. For as to the greater causes, and those wherein life and death were concerned, he enjoined they should be brought to him and the 70 elders. [Footnote: We see here, and in Josephus' account of his own life, how exactly he imitated his legislator Moses, or perhaps only obeyed what he took to be his perpetual law, in appointing 7 lesser judges for smaller causes, in particular cities, and perhaps for the first hearing of greater causes, with the liberty of an appeal to 71 supreme judges, especially in those causes where life and death were concerned. Moreover, we find that he imitated Moses as well as the Romans in the number and distribution of the subaltern officers of his army, as Exodus 18-25, Deuteronomy 1-15, and in his charge against the offences common among soldiers, as Deuteronomy 13-9, in all which he showed his great wisdom and piety, and skilful conduct in martial affairs. Yet may we discern in his very high character of Artanus the high priest, who seems to have been the same who condemned St. James, bishop of Jerusalem, to be stoned, under Albinus the procurator, that when he wrote these books of the war he was not so much as an Ebionite Christian, otherwise he would not have failed, according to his usual custom, to have reckoned this his barbarous murder as a just punishment upon him, for that his cruelty to the chief, or rather only Christian bishop of the circumcision. Nor, had he been then a Christian, could he immediately have spoken so movingly of the causes of the destruction of Jerusalem, without one word of either the condemnation of James or crucifixion of Christ, as he did when he was become a Christian afterward. Josephus also, when he had settled these rules for determining causes by the law, with regard to the people's dealings one with another, betook himself to make provisions for their safety against external violence. And as he knew the Romans would fall upon Galilee, he built walls in proper places about Jotapata, and Bersabee, and Salamis, and besides these about Capherecho, and Jaffa, and Sigo, and what they call Mount Tabor, and Tarihi, and Tiberias. Moreover, he built walls about the caves near the lake of Gennesar, which places lay in the lower Galilee. The same he did to the places of upper Galilee, as well as to the rock called the rock of the Achabari, and to Seph, and Jamnith, and Meroth, and in Gaulonitis he fortified Seleucia and Sogane and Gamala. But as to those of Sepphoris, they were the only people to whom he gave leave to build their own walls, and this because he perceived they were rich and wealthy and ready to go to war, without standing in need of any injunctions for that purpose. The case was the same with Gischala, which had a wall built about it by John the son of Levi himself, but with the consent of Josephus. But for the building of the rest of the fortresses he laboured together with all the other builders, and was present to give all the necessary orders for that purpose. He also got together an army out of Galilee of more than 100,000 young men, all of which he armed with the old weapons which he had collected together and prepared for them. And when he had considered that the Roman power became invincible, chiefly by their readiness in obeying orders, and the constant exercise of their arms, he despaired of teaching these his men to use of their arms, which was to be obtained by experience. But observing that their readiness in obeying orders was owing to the multitude of their officers, he made his partitions in his army more after the Roman manner, and appointed a great many subalterns. He also distributed the soldiers into various classes, whom he put under captains of tens, and captains of hundreds, and then under captains of thousands; and besides these he had commanders of larger bodies of men. He also taught them to give the signals one to another, and to call and recall the soldiers by the trumpets, how to expand the wings of an army, and make them wheel about, and when one wing has had success, to turn again and assist those that were hard set, and to join in the defence of what had most suffered. He also continually instructed them ill what concerned the courage of the soul, and the hardiness of the body, and above all he exercised them for war, by declaring to them distinctly the good order of the Romans, and that they were to fight with men who, both by the strength of their bodies and courage of their souls, had conquered in a manner the whole habitable earth. He told them that he should make trial of the good order they would observe in war, even before it came to any battle, in case they would abstain from the crimes they used to indulge themselves in, such as theft and robbery and rapine, and from defrauding their own countrymen, and never to esteem the harm done to those that were so near of kin to them to be any advantage for themselves. For that wars are then managed the best when the warriors preserve a good conscience, but that such as are ill men in private life will not only have those for enemies which attack them, but God himself also for their antagonist. And thus did he continue to admonish them. Now he chose for the war such an army as was sufficient, 60,000 footmen and 250 horsemen. [Footnote: I should think that an army of 60,000 footmen should require many more than 250 horsemen, and we find Josephus had more horsemen under his command than 250 in his future history. I suppose the number of the thousands is dropped in our present copies.] And besides these, on which he put the greater trust, there were about 4,500 mercenaries. He had also 600 men as guards of his body. Now the cities easily maintained the rest of his army, excepting the mercenaries, for every one of the cities, enumerated above, sent out half their men to the army, and retained the other half at home, in order to get provisions for them, insomuch that the one part went to the war, and the other part to their work, and so those that sent out their corn were paid for it by those that were in arms, by that security which they enjoyed from them. Book 2, Chapter 20.